Hi, I'm Carolyn Beam. I'm the Content Director for Quiltmaker and McCall's Quilting. I'd like to show you some fun ways to use the Wonky 9-patch templates. This template set comes with 2 different templates, and they both have just little odd angles on them. They're both different, and they can be used interchangeably. And the nice thing about these is they work with 10-inch squares. So you can either use pre-cut 10-inch squares or cut your own 10-inch squares. Doesn't matter. So the first thing you'll do is, for this first set that I'm going to show you, is you use 2 10-inch squares and layer them right sides up on a cutting mat. And I like to use this rotating cutting mat just because it's easier when I'm cutting to turn the mat. But you can also use regular cutting mat and just manually turn it yourself. So I'm going to take this one. This is labeled number 1, and it doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm just going to start with number 1. And you kind of place it, roughly in the center of your layered 10-inch squares. And then you'll go ahead and cut. Cut both sides. And then you're going to take either ruler and cut in the other direction. And what I'm going to do for this one is just flip the ruler over. Like I said, you can use either ruler, either one, and right side or wrong side. All different combinations. And I'll cut both sides here. Okay, so basically now we have 9 patches cut. And before you sew, you need to do a little rearranging. So I'm going to take every other one of these and put the top piece on the bottom. And this is going to create 2 different 9-patch blocks. And once you have them rearranged like this, time to go over to the sewing machine, and you're going to sew 3 separate rows. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when we cut these, there's no seam allowance added. So some of the edges just may not line up perfectly, and that's okay. These are supposed to be wonky. So we'll go ahead and sew these, and then let me show you what the rows look like after they're sewn. Okay, here I have sewn the 3 rows together for one of them. And I also have 3 rows sewn together for the second one. And you'll notice these are just opposite of each other. And like I said, some of these seams are not going to line up perfectly because there's no seam allowances added, and that's perfectly fine. That's what they're supposed to do. So now once we have the rows sewn, we're going to sew the rows together to make the 9-patch blocks. Okay, let me pull those up. Now you're going to end up with 2 9-patch blocks that aren't exactly squared off at this point. So the next step would be to trim these to 8.5-inch squares. So we'll line up a ruler. Now this ruler is 10.5 inches. It's helpful to have a ruler that's larger than a normal 6-inch ruler, so you can get an 8.5-inch ruler or a 10.5-inch. And just remember, we're trimming this to 8.5, so you want to make sure that your 8.5-inch lines are within the 9-patch. And we'll go ahead and trim off 2 sides. And then flip this around and square off the other 2 sides. And now I'm going to go ahead and use that 8.5-inch mark right on the lines that I've already cut. Okay, and here is a trimmed wonky 9-patch block. And we would need to do the same with the other one. So for every 2 squares that you start with, you're going to get 2 9-patch blocks that are the same opposite colors. Okay, so this is one way to use the Wonky 9-patch templates with 2 different fabrics. And I want to show you an example using 3 fabrics and what you can do. So here's some fun Halloween fabric that I had. And starting with 3 fabrics, if you remember when I moved every other patch to the bottom, you'll do the same thing with the corners, but in the center, instead of moving just 1 fabric to the bottom, you'll move 2 fabrics. So that way, each of these 3 blocks will be 3 different fabrics in different positions. So that's another fun way you can use these templates. And the last way I want to show you is if you have 9 fabrics. So this way is a little bit different, but it's going to create a really fun result. So I've already taken, actually I used the second template, number 2, on this one. And like I said before, they're interchangeable. You can use 1 or 2, flip it over, different directions. You can combine the 2, cut one direction with one, cut another direction with the other. Lots of different ways to combine these two. So what I've done is taken 9 fabrics, and these are black with white and white with black. And the way I layered these is dark, light, dark, light, all the way down. So I've cut through all 9, and you want, if you're going to use 9 fabrics, you need to have them all on top of each other, right side up, cutting them at the same time. You can't cut 2 different fabrics and have them match up, so they have to be stacked on top of each other. So once I've got the 9 cut, what I'm going to do is leave the first pile like it is. The second pile, I'm going to take the top fabric and put it in the bottom. The third pile, I'm going to take the top 2 fabrics, put them at the bottom. The fourth pile, take the top 3. So each one I'm adding 1 more fabric, but I'm moving down to the bottom. And that way what you're going to get is a 9 patch that has the lights in the corners, in the 4 middle parts, and the darks in the corners like this. And once I have these all flipped, you'd go ahead and sew them in the same progression. Sew the 3 rows together, then sew the rows, and what you end up with are 9 different 9-patch blocks that have a different arrangement of the same 9 fabrics. A great way to make a fun little quilt. So there's 3 different ways to use the Wonky 9-patch templates. And I'm going to show you just a finished quilt that I made. This one uses 2 fabrics, but it's a combination of many different teal, beige, and brown batiks. And the nice thing when you're sewing these blocks together is that these seams don't match up. They're all wonky. So the fun thing is that you don't have to match seams when you're sewing this quilt together. So to purchase these templates, go to the website shown below. Thanks for joining me.